Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight. Craig Daly won't be with us as he's out on regional meetings, so I am both your host and your presenter. So I'm very excited about that. Hold on, I'm trying to get the slides to advance. Sometimes I have trouble with that. Okay, I'm Cindy Clement. I've been in the health industry since about the mid-1970s. And have presented probably hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of classes on health, as well as my goodness, 4.5 decades of studying integrative and holistic medicine. I also have a master's degree in human nutrition. I'm a nationally certified health educator, and I'm also a nutritionist. And these days, folks, I'm semi-retired. I still teach my graduate level course at the university, as well as for Touchstone Essentials, because I love educating. It truly is my passion. But other than that, I'm really enjoying being a grandma. Tonight's presentation is on heavy metals. And heavy metals actually, think about this, they actually include some of the elements that are essential to our health in small amounts, such as iron and copper, but in larger amounts can be toxic. So I want to get started right away so that we can learn a bit more. The term heavy metal has been used as a general term for metals that have the potential for human or environmental toxicity. And you should know that heavy metal toxicity is an uncommon diagnosis with physicians because, face it, they have not been educated on the topic. However, you're going to see this, I made it quite big on the slide. It's www.aaemonline.org/find-a-practitioner/. The AAEM stands for, well, first of all, this is a place where you can find an environmental physician, if you need to, that's been certified by the American Academy of Environmental Medicine. And this would be someone who would look more closely at this than an untrained physician in environmental matters. So, I mean, it makes sense. You know, oftentimes your physician will send you to a specialist. Well, this would be a specialist especially if you're occupationally exposed to these heavy metals. It might be nice to have somebody like that on your team. Now, heavy metal poisoning or toxicity, whatever you want to call it, is the result of exposures to things like lead and mercury, arsenic, chromium, cadmium, and of course others. And then after exposure, these microscopic molecules of heavy metals bind to different parts of our cells, and they prevent our organs from doing their job. And symptoms of heavy metal poisoning can be as serious as life-threatening, and it can cause irreversible damage in some people. So heavy metals enter our tissues when we breathe in air inhalation through our diet and our water supply, as well as through our skin. And sources of toxicity, as I just mentioned, could be our water supply. It could be industrial sources, environmental sources, our hobbies, and other things. But this is going to most often affect people who drink water from pipes made of older metals, such as in the older homes, and these pipes were made of lead, or those who work with metals. When people take more of a prescribed dosage of their medication, or they take supplements that they unknowingly contain heavy metals, especially Ayurvedic and Chinese herbs. It can affect those who live in an environment with high air and water pollution. It can affect those who eat a lot of foods that contain metals like fish and rice, and we'll talk about more of those foods in a bit. Or even those who consume what we call non-edible products made with metal, specifically paint. So in the older homes, the paint was made with lead, and in some of these older homes, the children see these flakes of chipped paint, and they eat that. And so that's another way that one could possibly or potentially be exposed. But there are other places that we can be exposed. We can be exposed through dyes and inks, through plastics, through paints and primers and other types of surface coatings, aluminum-based antacids. We can be exposed by cooking our foods in aluminum foil, using aluminum cookware, drinking or eating foods out of aluminum cans, our exposure to, again, old building materials, and even exhaust exposure. But folks, really, the list is endless. Now, the level of toxicity in the body depends on several factors, including how much of it you were exposed to. So we call that the dose of the toxicant. Also, the route of exposure. So was it inhalation? Was it through the skin? Did you eat it? Did you drink it? That kind of a thing. But also one's age, their gender, the genetics, their nutritional status, as well as the health of the detoxification organs. So the effects can really vary. For instance, mercury exposure in the womb, because their mothers ate, again, unknowingly ate fish or shellfish that was contaminated with methylmercury, this adversely affects an unborn infant's growing brain and nervous system, and it can result in impacts on their cognitive thinking, on their memory, their attention, their language, their fine motor skills, as well as their visual spatial skills. And this is one of the reasons why women who are of childbearing age or who are pregnant or nursing should not consume fish whatsoever, or children under 6 is what they say. So it's really something to think about. And while we're on the topic of children, they are at a higher risk of heavy metal poisoning because their bodies are still developing and they're more sensitive to the harmful effects of heavy metals. Their detoxification organs, most of the time, are not quite yet fully developed. For instance, a child's kidneys don't develop until they reach 2 to 3 years of age, for example. And since the immune response memory is not fully established until 18 years of age, exposure to these environmental agents during childhood can affect immune system development, for instance, or it may contribute to the development of certain diseases such as asthma and cancer, even later in life. Now, there has been a general decline in blood lead levels that's occurred since the 1970s, when lead was no longer added to paint, but studies have shown that large populations of children continue to have elevated blood lead levels. In fact, lead poisoning is one of the most common pediatric health problems in the United States today. And like mercury, exposure to lead is really of a special concern among women during pregnancy because the lead absorbed by the mother is readily transferred to the developing fetus. And this is true of many of the other environmental contaminants. And the human evidence links this prenatal exposure to lead with reduced birth weight and preterm delivery and with neurodevelopmental abnormalities in the child after they're born. So there are just all kinds of things that we have to think about with these heavy metals. In fact, some of the signs and symptoms of lead toxicity include things like gastrointestinal complaints, high blood pressure, fatigue, anemia, abdominal pains, nausea, constipation, weight loss, something called peripheral neuropathy, which is where you have pain, especially in the feet, like in a diabetic, or even cognitive dysfunction with lead toxicity, something called arthralgias, which is kind of an arthritis type thing with aches and pains, also headache and weakness and convulsions and irritability and impotence and loss of libido, depression, thyroid and adrenal disorders, chronic kidney failure, gout. Oh my goodness. And this is just the physical symptoms of lead toxicity. The emotional, or I would say the mental symptoms of lead toxicity, their restlessness and insomnia, irritability, excitement, anxiety, confusion, delusions, disturbing dreams. And so you start to look at these lists and you have to wonder if all these poor children coming into the world today that seem to have so many problems emotionally, I just have to wonder if the environmental contaminants haven't played quite a role in that. What's interesting is a person with lead poisoning may have a combination of symptoms. They may have no symptoms at all until the condition has progressed to something very chronic. And this is one of the reasons why heavy metal toxicity goes undiagnosed for such long periods of time. Now, because of the high degree of toxicity, arsenic, cadmium, chromium, lead, and mercury rank among the priority metals that are of public health significance. And these metallic elements are considered systemic. That means body-wide toxicants that are known to induce multiple organ damage, even at lower levels of exposure. And these heavy metals are also classified as human carcinogens, which means can promote cancer in the body. And this is according to the United States Environmental Protection Agency, as well as the International Agency for Research on Cancer. So what I want to do is I want to take a look at just these 5 metals. There are certainly more, but these are the ones that are most prominent in our environment. And we'll begin with lead. Adults absorb between 35 and 50% of lead through drinking water. And the absorption rate from children is even greater. That can be as high as 50 to 60%. And aside from contaminated water, exposure to lead can occur from pipes, of course, but it can also come from batteries, from ammunition, from soldering, from paint, from leaded gasoline, from pigments, construction materials, as well as devices to shield X-rays. And in the human body, the greatest percentage of lead is taken up by the kidney, followed by the liver, and then other soft tissues, such as the heart and the brain, as well as hard tissues, such as our bones. The nervous system, however, is the most vulnerable target of lead poisoning. And again, some of the early symptoms of the effects of lead exposure on that central nervous system, which remember is the brain and nervous system, the early symptoms can be headache, poor attention span, irritability, as well as loss of memory. Now, mercury is a widespread environmental toxicant, which has a wide range of adverse health effects. And some of the symptoms of mercury toxicity include a metallic taste in the mouth or excessive salivation, gingivitis, which is a gum disease, tremors, stomach and kidney troubles, irritability, depression, psychosis, mental deterioration, as well as anorexia. And mercury toxicity has been linked, of course, to mercury dental fillings, again, to batteries, to topical antiseptics, fluorescent light bulbs, as well as thermometers. When I was a child, oh my goodness, my brother, my family as children, now again, this is in the 50s, we used to play with mercury. We thought it was fascinating. We would put it in our hands and play with it. Oh my. Since then, of course, I've been able to detoxify it from my body, but you just never know. One day I was working here in my study, and we have a house that was built in 1959. And my husband's an architect, so he's always remodeling something or other. But while he was out of town, one of the old fluorescent light bulbs burst, and I knew that that was mercury, and I was panic stricken. And again, I had to air out the house as best I could and then do a lot of detoxifying. So you just never know where you're going to be exposed. Mercury also makes its way through the food chain. It gets into fish and shellfish. And then, of course, we eat that, and eventually it ends up in humans. And I want you to know that although cooking fish does tend to diminish some of the environmental contaminants, it does not diminish the mercury content in fish. There was one study that was conducted that showed that frequent fish eaters have 11 times more mercury than a group who rarely ate fish. And there was an incident of exposure to mercury through the consumption of contaminated fish that occurred in the mid-1950s in a place called Minamata Bay in Japan. And the infants born to these pregnant women who had been eating this fish were born with severe developmental disabilities, of neurological damage. They had loss of full body control of their movements. They had muscle weakness, numb limbs. They had disturbances in speech and chewing and swallowing. So these heavy metals are something extremely important to consider detoxifying from, and you can. So the good news is we can. Arsenic exposure occurs through the use of topical creams, exposures to pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, paints, enamels, dyes, wood preservatives, and again, by ingesting contaminated water and seafood. Now, for most individuals, the diet is our largest source of exposure after occupational exposure. And the average intake of arsenic in the human diet is about 50 milligrams per day. And unfortunately, rice is really efficient at absorbing arsenic from pesticide-laden soil, from the water that was used in irrigation, and even in your own cooking water at home when you're cooking it. But it's good to know that there are some rice that have half the arsenic amounts in them. And that would be basmati rice from California, India, and Pakistan, believe it or not, and sushi rice from the United States. Those have all been shown to have half the amount of arsenic than most of the other types of rice. Now, arsenic exposure affects virtually all organ systems, including the cardiovascular system, our skin, our nervous system, our liver, kidneys, gastrointestinal system, as well as the respiratory system. And symptoms of toxicity can include things like nausea or vomiting, abdominal pain or diarrhea, a strange garlic odor on someone's breath, excessive salivation, headaches, vertigo, fatigue, kidney failure, progressive blindness, as well as mental impairment. So as I mention all of these awful things these heavy metals do, believe me, Touchstone Essentials has the answer to all of our problems. Cadmium exposure, on the other hand, it's possible through a number of sources, like most of these heavy metals, including employment in primary metal industries, but also eating contaminated food and smoking cigarettes. Cigarette smoking, in particular, is known to expose people to very high levels of cadmium. And more recently, cadmium has also been identified in those e-cigarettes. There was a study conducted or published in 2019 that found concentrations of other heavy metals in e-cigarettes, including things like lead and copper. So smoking cigarettes and e-cigarettes, if you're trying to avoid exposure, you might want to think about getting rid of those. Cadmium is also present in trace amounts in foods, such as leafy vegetables and potatoes, seeds, organ meats, as well as seafood. And the blood vessels are considered the main organs of cadmium toxicity, but then those blood vessels distribute the cadmium to the kidneys and the liver and throughout the body. Now, the chronic inhalation exposure to cadmium, which of course would occur in occupational exposure, is associated with negative changes in respiratory functions that are almost like an emphysema. Workplace exposure, again, to this cadmium particulates, interestingly, have been associated with decreases in what's called olfactory function, and that would be your sense of smell. Several studies have even documented an association of chronic low-level cadmium exposure with decreases in bone mineral density, meaning one of the culprits of osteoporosis. Now, the last one is chromium, and chromium compounds are used in industrial welding, in chrome plating, in dyes, pigments, leather tanning, wood preservation, as well as what we call anti-corrosive agents for cooking systems and boilers. And of course, occupational exposure to chromium is known to cause multi-organ toxicity, such as kidney damage, asthma, and cancer of the respiratory tract. And even though the principal route of exposure to chromium in humans is through inhalation, there's been significant human exposure to chromium reportedly taking place through the skin. For example, the widespread incidence of dermatitis that is noticed among construction workers is attributed to their exposure to chromium present in cement. So chromium can cause a variety of diseases through that bioaccumulation in the skin. It can cause problems with our kidney, brain, and nervous system, including our gastrointestinal tract, as well as increasing our risk to cancers of the lungs, the throat, the bladder, testicles, bone, and thyroid. So what can we do about this? Well, we need plant medicine, and here's why. Research shows that cilantro is capable of removing heavy metals and other toxic agents from the body. It goes really deep into those hard-to-reach places in the body, extracting those minerals from what we call yesteryear. So it's really great for that mercury inheritance that you've been carrying around. Now, according to various studies, heavy metal detoxification using cilantro and chlorella, which you'll also see on this list, can remove an average of 87% of lead, 91% of mercury, and 74% of aluminum from the body in just 45 days. Do you see what I mean? We can get this stuff out. In the clinical trials and research, cilantro, I'm thinking of chlorella. Cilantro was shown to mobilize mercury, tin, and other toxic metals. So mobilizing means that once you break it down, you don't want it recirculating back in the body. So when you mobilize it, what cilantro does is it grabs onto it and holds it steady to keep it from being recirculated. So it it mobilizes these toxic metals that are stored in the brain or the spinal cord, and it moves them very rapidly out of the tissue. And in this research showed that cilantro is the first known substance to mobilize mercury from the central nervous system. So, wow, cilantro is found in super green juice. Now, blueberries, they've been shown and proven to help detox heavy metals from the brain's glymphatic system. We talked about that in the webinar on the brain and nervous system. So the glymphatic system is a system that detoxifies the brain, but only while we sleep. So if you missed that presentation, you might want to go back and visit that. So blueberries draw out those heavy metals from brain tissue, and then they heal and repair any of the gaps that were created by oxidation when those heavy metals were removed. And then what happens is the potent antioxidants in blueberries help reverse any of that oxidative damage left behind by the heavy metal removal. And that is something that's really important for brain tissue. Now, blueberries are found in both essentials as well as super green juice. Lemons, which are extremely high in vitamin C, they restart digestion by stimulating enzymes, and an effective digestion is the core of detoxification. Fruits and vegetables that are high in vitamin C can help reduce the damage caused by heavy metal toxins, and they act as an antioxidant. Now, vitamin C helps to convert toxins into water-soluble forms that can be eliminated more easily from the body in the urine. Now, lemon, of course, is found in essentials. Next is spirulina, and this is a very powerful detoxifying agent. What it does is it chelates all types of toxins, such as heavy metals, radioactive materials, pesticides, environmental carcinogens, and it eliminates them from the body. So a substance that binds to heavy metals is known as a chelator. And the process that transports them out of the body is called chelation. So you'll sometimes hear people refer to a heavy metal detox as chelation therapy. Now, spirulina is that blue-green algae that draws out the heavy metals from the brain, the nervous system, the liver, and it soaks up these heavy metals that have been extracted by the barley grass juice powder. We'll get to that one in just a moment. Spirulina is found in super green juice. Now, chlorella. Chlorella has gotten some buzz for its ability to help the body detox by reducing mercury levels in patients with long-term dental amalgam fillings, as well as titanium implants. Now, animal studies have indicated that chlorella is also effective at removing not only heavy metals, but other compounds from the body as well. In animals, chlorella was found to weaken the heavy metal toxicity in the liver, the brain, and the kidneys. But furthermore, chlorella has been shown to help lower the amount of harmful chemicals that are sometimes found in food. And one of those harmful chemicals is dioxin. And this is an endocrine disruptor, a hormone disruptor that can contaminate animals in our food supply. So chlorella can mobilize the mercury from inside the brain and from the muscles and from the ligaments, the connective tissue, and the bone. So it's something that's extremely useful for heavy metal detoxification, and it's found in super green juice. Now, barley grass juice powder, what it does is it draws out the heavy metals from the liver, the spleen, the intestinal tract, the pancreas, the thyroid, as well as the reproductive system. And as mentioned earlier in this presentation, barley grass prepares mercury for complete absorption by spirulina. Fascinating, isn't it? I just love plant medicine. Barley grass contains what we call phytonutrients. That just means plant nutrients. And what they do is they feed the liver while allowing it to detoxify dozens of toxins and poisons that you've inherited from your past, as well as those that you're being exposed to in the present moment. Barley grass powder is a responsible detoxifier, and it has this give and take integrity. And what it does is it replaces the troublemakers it removes from the body with vital nutrients. So barley grass is found in both super greens plus D as well as super green juice. Now, unlike other seaweeds, dulse is a powerful force for removing mercury, and it too goes deep into those hidden places in the digestive tract and gut. It seeks out that mercury, binds to it, and never releases it until it leaves the body. And that helps to ensure that not only mercury, but that all these heavy metals that have made it as far as it could to the colon, they actually leave the body. So think of dulse as going in there and just sweeping it out and taking it, eliminating it from the stool. So dulse is found in super green juice. And lastly, the green tea. Green tea contains catechins, which are powerful antioxidants, and they're known to boost levels of glutathione. Glutathione is the, it's the mother of all antioxidants in the body. It's actually made in the liver, and it's a key metal detoxifying agent in our body. And what green tea does is it binds to these internalized metals and excretes them through the urine. And the high levels of chlorophyll give this tea its vibrant green color and makes it a powerful detoxifier. It's capable of naturally helping to remove heavy metals and toxins from the body. So, of course, matcha green tea is found in super green juice. So what else do we have available for heavy metal detoxification? Well, zeolites, of course. A National Institute of Medicine, and it's the National Library of Medicine study, concluded that due to zeolite's remarkable detoxifying effects, it has proven useful in the elimination of a variety of contaminants from the body. They did just one study. There were 102 heavy metal contaminated men that were investigated in this study. And they were able to, using zeolites, clinoptilolite, zeolite, they were able to decrease concentrations of all heavy, harmful metals measured in their hair. They were able to reduce it after a 30-day supplementation with zeolites. But what else have we got? We've got fulvic acid. Fulvic acid bonds with heavy metals and converts them into inactive compounds, which can then be eliminated through our normal excretory processes. And fulvic acid is capable of binding to and breaking down these toxins and metals that enter our body through the food supply, through water, through prescription medications, through household products, through air pollution, and you name it. And this allows it to act as a detoxification agent. And once it becomes reactive with metals, Fulvic acid helps them become more soluble in water, which means they're carried out of the body more easily. And fulvic acid is highly effective at neutralizing and detoxifying harmful toxins and pollutants, which of course includes heavy metals. But keep in mind that the quality of the fulvic acid that you consume is essential for reaping its full benefits. And because products with fulvic acid are not regulated, really, there's no telling what you're going to get. So if you're ingesting it from a source that you don't know how pure the product is, you could be ingesting heavy metals like mercury and arsenic, things that are found as well in some of these other herbs from other countries. In fact, there have been studies that show an increase in lead, mercury, and arsenic, and issues with lead poisoning in unpure fulvic acid supplementation. Whew. So, to recap, heavy metals enter the body from different ways, including drinking water, our food supply, the air we breathe, in contact with our skin. And then following absorption, these heavy metals bioaccumulate in our body. And this bioaccumulation of toxic metals leads to a diversity of toxic effects on a variety of body tissues and organs. They can disrupt our cellular growth, our cellular proliferation, our cell damaging repairing processes, as well as increase the rate of cell death in the body. And remember, in order to detoxify the body, we need to provide nutrition to the organs of detoxification, and we need to use organic, quality tested products to make sure we're not contributing to our exposure of toxicants. And thank goodness, Touchstone Essentials' diligence in providing the highest quality supplements available today, that is such a blessing. And we can rest assured that they've done all the work for us. So we don't need to look any further than these terrific heavy metal detox products. And again, by adding in Super Green Juice, Essentials, Super Greens Plus D, along with Pure Body and Fulvic Minerals Plus, you can continue to support the body in its detoxification efforts on a daily basis. And folks, it's not going to happen overnight. But again, the research shows that we can reduce the amount of heavy metals in the body between 90 and 120 days if we can avoid recontamination. So be very diligent over the next 3 or 4 months in using these products for detoxification and avoiding future exposure as much as you can. And then use them on a daily basis for the things that you can't control, that you've been, the chemicals that you've been exposed to. So folks, that concludes our webinar for this evening. I'm inviting you to join us again on December 3rd for a presentation on aches and pains in the body and why that happens and what we can do about it. So good night. Thank you for spending time with us this evening, and have a wonderful Thanksgiving.